Participants. Liam argues for a strong ban with essential use exemptions. Noah argues against a blanket ban, favors targeted regulation and phased substitution. Liam, let's start with first principles. PFAS are forever chemicals because they don't meaningfully break down. Once we release them, they disperse globally, accumulate in people and wildlife, and become essentially impossible to claw back. That's exactly the profile that justifies class-based restrictions. We tried regulating one compound at a time and we're decades behind while exposure remains widespread. Noah, I agree persistence is a red flag. But class-based ban is doing a lot of work there. PFAS is a gigantic class, from small mobile molecules to high molecular weight fluoropolymers with very different behaviors. If we lump them all together, we risk banning materials that are critical in medical devices, semiconductors, and clean energy tech without proven substitutes. That creates real safety and economic trade-offs. Liam, which is why I'm not arguing for a cartoonish, flip-the-switch ban. I'm arguing for a phase-out with essential use exemptions. You define essential narrowly, necessary for health, safety, or critical societal function, and time limit those exemptions with milestones for substitution. Meanwhile, you rapidly end non-essential uses like stain-proof sprays, fast food wrappers, and cosmetics coatings. Those exposures are large, diffuse, and unnecessary. Noah, the essential use idea is reasonable in theory. In practice, agencies struggle to define essential, and companies often argue every use is critical. Also, substitutes can be regrettable. If we swap to alternatives that are less studied, but still persistent, we've moved sideways. I'd rather see strict discharge limits, product-specific standards, and aggressive transparency rules that force data on both PFAS and alternatives before we judge. Liam, we can do both, class restrictions to prevent whack-a-mole, plus product-specific performance standards and disclosure to avoid regrettable swaps. The health evidence is already more than enough to justify decisive action: immune effects in children, developmental outcomes, and cancer signals in highly exposed communities. We lose time and money waiting for perfect certainty when the exposure is cumulative and the cleanup costs explode. Noah, cleanup costs are real, but so are transition costs. Some fluoropolymer applications in medical tubing, membranes, and high-performance seals aren't easily replaced. If a mandated timeline is too short, we delay surgeries, disrupt chip supply chains, and hinder climate tech deployment. That hurts public welfare in other ways. A targeted approach with tiered timelines lets us keep critical performance while we invest in safer materials. Liam, timelines should be risk-weighted. The fastest phase-outs hit non-essential, high-leakage uses. Essential uses get narrow, time-limited exemptions tied to R and AMP, D milestones, procurement incentives for safer materials, and public reporting so there's accountability. We pair that with enforceable effluent limits, monitoring, and polluter pays for legacy contamination. That structure drives innovation instead of complacency. Noah, accountability I can get behind, especially on emissions and drinking water safety. But I still worry a class-based restriction hardens into a de facto blanket ban that stifles nuanced science. For some endpoints, the epidemiology is heterogeneous, and dose matters. Shouldn't we set exposure thresholds and prioritize the biggest contributors rather than declaring the entire class off limits? Liam, dose matters, exposure pathways matter. But persistence changes the calculus. For persistent chemicals, Every kilogram produced raises long-term background levels. Thresholds we consider safe today can be exceeded tomorrow because the molecules don't go away. That's why prevention at the source is the most rational lever. And the class approach is the only way to keep us ahead of small molecular tweaks that dodge narrow rules. Noah, then let's talk implementation. What does your policy look like next year, not in a white paper? Liam, Year 1. Ban non-essential consumer uses with clear categories. Require product disclosures for any remaining uses, set effluent limits for industrial discharges, and launch grant/loan programs to help small manufacturers retool. Year 2 to 5. Progressively tighten exemptions, require alternatives analyses for each essential use, and publish substitution roadmaps. Add procurement preferences for PFAS-free materials in public contracts to scale markets. Noah, I'd sequence differently. Immediately require facility-level monitoring, best available control technology on discharges, and drinking water treatment where needed. Product-by-product rules first, then class-based restrictions only where substitution is demonstrated. Fund targeted R&D on the hardest use cases, medical, aerospace, microelectronics, so we don't force premature substitutions that fail in the field. Liam, your plan risks another decade of incrementalism. Meanwhile, persistent pollution grows. If we build the policy around essential use plus strict emissions controls, we get the best of both worlds, prevention and practicality. We've done this before with ozone depleters, phased down with carve-outs, aggressive innovation, and international coordination. It worked because we drew a line and then helped industry cross it. Noah, the ozone analogy is helpful but not perfect. PFAS covers thousands of chemistries, and the market uses are far more diverse. Still, I'll concede that non-essential consumer uses could be phased out quickly with minimal harm. My insistence is that we explicitly protect truly critical domains and avoid locking in timelines that compromise safety or reliability. Liam, agreed on protecting critical domains, temporarily. The public health default should be phased out unless a use is proven essential with no viable alternative, evaluated transparently, and reviewed regularly. That framing reverses the burden of proof and aligns with the reality that persistence pushes risk onto communities and future generations. Noah, then we're closer than it sounds. I want rigorous endpoints, measured timelines, and investment in substitutes. You want decisive prevention with accountability. If policy can codify both, clear bans on non-essentials, defensible exemptions with sunsets, strong monitoring and liability, we may actually thread the needle. Liam, exactly. Strong guardrails now, focused innovation, and a narrow lane for essential uses that shrinks over time. That's how we stop adding to a forever problem while keeping people safe today.